Hey, thanks for tuning into the Land and Home Show. On today's episode, we're discussing farms, fact and fiction. Hey there, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in Central Kentucky and beyond. This episode is all about, really getting straight what exactly is a farm and what isn't. I hear a lot of inaccurate use of that word, and this is not an episode to criticize, but just to educate, because at the end of the day, farming is really hard work, and owning land is not necessarily the same thing. In fact, 2% of our U.S. population is who is responsible for us eating or our animals eating or some of the additives that go into our gasoline, which is a lot of money right now. Farming is an industry that is held up by very, very few people who work very, very hard, who ultimately don't oftentimes make a lot of money. It's a very difficult thing. And so I think to just in, what is the word I'm looking for? In interest of respect and interest of information and accuracy, we owe it to the farming community just to call things what they are, and not all things are farms. So that's why I'm making the video. So let's start with fiction. And this is probably the most common one, that a farm is dictated by its size or scale. People often mistake having a lot of land for that constituting as a farm. And scale alone is not really what dictates a farm. And in fact, of course, someone's texting me as I'm trying to record, but, and scale is really relative too. Here in Central Kentucky, the largest farms tend to be horse farms, and those can range from several hundred acres to maybe a couple thousand. So here, that's big. You go out to Western Kentucky and you've got soybean farms and you've got corn being grown on 4,000 acres and 5,000 acres. Whereas if you go to Texas, 4,000 acres is kind of child's play, and you're really not doing anything big until you get into the five digits of 20,000 acres, 30,000 acres, 40,000 acres. So the idea of a lot of land is already relative, but the amount of land owned does not simply constitute something being a farm or not being a farm. But the fiction was, size dictates whether something's a farm or not. But the fact here is that the scale or size and productivity are what dictate the classification of something as a farm. Say you have 220 acres. Is that big enough to be a farm? Yes, depending on what it is you're growing, that kind of thing, or what it is you're raising. Yes, 220 acres is enough space to be a farm. But the other equally important component here is the productivity of it all. Is it a main job that you're doing for income, or a main thing that you're doing to feed yourself? But underlying all of that is, what are you doing? There has to be some sort of intentional raising of something or growing of something for there to even be productivity. To have wild berries growing, randomly somewhere on your property doesn't mean that you're a berry farmer. Having wild turkeys everywhere or deer everywhere doesn't make you a deer farmer or a turkey farmer. Having grass growing out of the ground doesn't make you a hay operation. There has to be an intentional thing here where you are manipulating, taking care of land and or animals in order to fulfill this idea of earning income or feeding yourself and your family or several people, whatever. So productivity is huge, and it has to go along necessarily with scale, with size. However, those two ideas are malleable depending on what it is you're growing or raising. For instance, if you wanted to farm horses, if you wanted to have a horse farm, like a true horse farm, you're going to make money and all that. You need a lot of space. So you're not going to have a 2-acre horse farm. You're probably going to have like a couple hundred acres at least, to have a proper horse farm to, make money. And however you make money, whether that's breeding or racing or whatever, you need a lot of space. Oppositely, if you were to be a tree farmer, you don't need hundreds of acres depending on the type of tree. So like if you were the type of person to make money off of Christmas trees, and I say Christmas trees because, pines, conifers, anything with like needles, they grow really fast and they grow very densely, meaning in a small space, you can have like a lot of trees that are growing. Therefore, you don't need 200 acres. You may have a successful tree farm, or I should just say Christmas tree farm, with 50 acres. That's entirely plausible. So depending on what it is you're producing, will determine in part the scale of whether or not something is a farm or not. Hopefully that makes sense. Here's another fact about farms. Farms can be described in other categories that don't just pertain to what is being produced. So sure, you've heard horse farm, you've heard cattle farm, sometimes they're called ranches depending on what part of the country you're in. All of these different things that speak to what it is the farming operation produces. But there are other ways to describe farms. So there's the concept of a gentleman's farm or a hobby farm, and they're pretty much the same thing. But this is an indication of someone who probably owns less land, meaning whatever it is they're growing, it's probably not enough land to produce in such a way that is going to allow them to make a living. So gentlemen's farms, hobby farms, they're usually like, 13 acres, 50 acres. They may be growing food. They may have some goats. They may have some chickens. It kind of starts to cross into this homesteading kind of idea, but they're doing it for the love of farming, for the passion of farming, more as a lifestyle and maybe some sustenance. Maybe they're, butchering their own animals there, but it's not how they exclusively live off of the land, and it's not exclusively how they make money. It's just, it's for the love of being a good steward of land. And, farming can be fun. It's hard work, but it can also be fun. And then there's the concept of a mini farm, where, even smaller, maybe you have, 5 acres, a house and 5 acres, and you're highly productive on those 5 acres. You've got some apple trees, you've got a vegetable area, you've got a few, what is that? Sorry, I get a little squirrely. There's something outside that is in a shape I don't recognize. I can't tell if there's a horse walking down the street. Anyway, back to this. If you have a mini farm, then, that directly speaks to the size of the farm, but also is speaking to the idea that there's stuff going on. There's productive things going on where maybe you are sustaining your entire life just in this 5 acres, that'd be kind of hard to do depending on where you live, seasonally speaking, but possible. So those are other ways to describe farms that aren't necessarily indicative of what is being produced. Now, here's a piece of farming fiction. It is the idea that farming only happens on land. And that's just not true. It's called aquaculture. So take everything that I spoke of when it comes to productivity and scale. Those things are still requirements in terms of defining a farm that's in the water. But the only difference is you're raising aquatic things. So, you could feasibly have a seaweed farm. But more commonly, we see farms that are fish farms. Think about anytime you've ever gone to Costco or Kroger or whatever the name of your grocery store is, and you see salmon or frozen tuna, and it says farm raised. Well, that's because some people raise fish. So they make sure that the fish are fed. They They take care of the water in such a way that the conditions are favorable for good growth of whatever whatever fish it is that they are producing. But aquaculture is a growing aspect in the agriculture world. It's kind of like a sub agriculture. It's like a sub what's the word I'm looking for? Sub industry in producing food or animal products. I should say plant or animal products, because there are like seaweed farms. And I don't know if you follow any of the like global news in farming, but interesting story right now with Spain is somewhere in there they are wanting to open up the world's first commercial octopus farming operation. There's a lot of opinions, as you might imagine. It's never been done before, and there's a lot of concern about the health and safety of the octopuses as they're being bred and kept in captivity, that kind of thing. I don't have an opinion because I don't know much about it, but it's just another aspect of aquaculture or farming in the water that has evolved as farming has. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is just the fact that there are lots of ways to describe land that are otherwise not agricultural. You can call land. You can call non-farming land acreage. You can call it a tract, T-R-A-C-T. You can call it a parcel. And then you can use other descriptive words. You could call it a wooded tract, a recreational parcel, a piece of undeveloped land. There's lots of ways to describe non-agricultural land, but at the end of the day, owning land is not the same as owning a farm. It just isn't. And like I said in the beginning, I think that we owe it to the select few people who venture into this very difficult line of work to keep us all, I shouldn't say all, I know there's a lot of hunger even in our country, but to keep our food systems running. That's the main thing here. I think that farmers deserve a lot more respect and recognition for what they do, but at the very least, we can talk about things in accurate ways. I think that we can all, I hope, agree these days that, call a spade a spade. And if you're not farming, you're not a farmer. You don't own a farm. So that's all I've got for you today. I am going to make tacos. It is not Taco Tuesday, but to me, there's no bad day to have taco. And I'm going to have myself a margarita. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Happy Wednesday. And if you got any questions, comments, leave them below. You know how to reach me. All that stuff's in the description. And just stay tuned for more stuff. Peace.